Welcome to the Conceive, Believe, and Achieve podcast. I'm your host, Shawn Geris. Today we have an amazing guest, a fellow that I've known for a while now, Olympic silver medalist, a national team coach, Olympic team coach for the United States of America. His specialty was Greco-Roman. I guess still is Greco-Roman. You haven't lost your skills at all, I bet. Still beating up people from what I understand. You're training down at Team Quest down there in Portland, Oregon.
Yeah, man, I'm back in Portland. I left USA Wrestling a year ago and came back to Portland to focus on the gym. A lot has changed in Portland in the last decade, man. It's really changed a lot. I've actually moved farther away from the city than I was living when I was raising my kids. And that's
Hmm.
kind of why I took that job at USA Wrestling and coached the national team. I got both my kids out of the house, and they were thriving, doing well, still are.
Hmm.
Just new phases in their life. The only sad thing was my daughter moved out to Colorado, and she met her husband, and she still lives there. So we still got to make some trips back to Colorado, but it's not a bad place, brother.
Yeah, yeah. Colorado or Portland?
Portland's a bad place. Portland's rough, man. We need a
Mm.
lot of help, and we've since created a nonprofit to support kids, young youth kids that are stacked on top of each other in urban centers. We now live in our gym is now in one of the highest density urban center in Portland and all of the state of Oregon. Just a lot of low income housing stacked on top of each other. And these kids, their parents work all day, or they don't have one parent or the other. And so we pick them up right after school, walk them to the gym, get them a snack, they're pretty wound up, man. They're pretty wound up. Like, you start to learn sometimes I thought, okay, man, they just need to get on the mats and get it out of them. Well, what happens is they just get more wound up and exhausted and wound up at the same time. Really hard to get them to come back down and focus. So now we build in routines for the kids. It's like, you're gonna change your clothes, you're gonna get a snack, you know. Now you're gonna bow in on the mat. It's like, slow this thing down. Okay, we can play for like 15 minutes. Now I want you back off the mat. Get your water. Get your bathroom break. We are going to start class, and classes have been just amazing for this group of kids that I mean, they live right around the gym, and we have
Hmm.
them a couple hours a day. I think it's a little too much, but it's just, we wouldn't have them at all if we didn't go pick them up. So,
Hmm.
they would be stuck with some daycare after school daycare center, and instead they get to come to the gym and train martial arts. And they all got their first tournament coming up on December 3rd. Is their
Awesome.
first the kids that have been with us for a year now are going to start their first competition. So they're pretty stoked.
Yeah, I bet. Now you're talking about kids, single parent homes, or I guess lack of parental supervision at home and stuff like that. I was just reading an article about a young kid who lived in a gang impacted neighborhood, and he was talking about his buddy, and he said his buddy was waiting for his dad. Was looking forward to this time out with his dad. And that weekend he was looking so much forward to it, and dad didn't show up. And then he could tell that in his friend, it was it was affecting him emotionally. It was draining this poor kid, and he was at class, and he was scribbling on his desk like we used to do when we were in grade school. But he's writing dad, 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 and he's getting angry. You could see the I guess the pain in his face. This is what the kid was saying. And then the teacher said, "Hey, do your work." And it was just that, do your work. And he just erupted to the point where he started screaming and yelling. They had to bring in some teachers to secure him, bring him down the hallway. Punches were thrown. Police officers were called. Apparently this kid years later was um, charged with the attempt murder. 14 years old when that happened. So um, he didn't have an outlet to really get that frustration in. And what I was getting to is like you talking about Portland and how it's gone downhill, and how you're living, or sorry, how you're helping these young kids where your gym is situated, right? And how it is providing them with an outlet to kind of one get that aggression out, but because those are the real life things that are occurring in these kids' lives are
Well,
kind of.
it's not necessarily getting it out. It's
Mhm,
focusing that aggression. That I mean, they have a lot. They got a lot of energy. They've
mhm,
got a lot of aggression, but focusing in like a positive direction.
mhm,
It's like there's nothing wrong with these kids, other than the fact that they don't have an ideal environment. They're living in a small apartment. They're stacked on top of each other. A lot of them don't have fathers in the home, so they have these father wounds. And I mean, our organization, ironically, is the Father's Heart Combat Sports. So
mhm,
it's about getting these kids into the gym, giving them something productive to train for. Hey, we got a tournament coming up. Let's get more focused. But it's directing that energy. It's not just letting it go wild and live into their nature, or drugging the kids. Like, I asked one of my buddies who's a neuroscientist, PhD in neuroscience. He's a researcher, and I said, you think they're just over prescribing these ADD medicines, and the answer was certainly yes.
mhm,
Like, more people aren't having ADD. This is the ADD ADHD thing is a symptom of being a young man and being a boy,
mhm,
being a man. We don't focus, and then when we do focus on something, we get really focused, like
yeah,
if it's something we want to do, as men,
mhm,
like if there's something we want to do, we'll focus for hours and learn. I mean, I just had a great experience. I was out in the woods for 4 days, hunting, and this is only the second time I've ever done this. And there's a lot of things you got to focus on, and things happen really quick. Like it's slow. You're hiking, you're chasing, then all of a sudden you know that they're probably down there, but then you walk over a little crest, and there's all these horns sticking up, and you're like things get crazy fast.
mhm,
And then after you kill an animal, it's like, okay, now 4 hours later you're dragging it out of the hill over the rain, and that's hard to stay focused. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of the reward of the whole process of going out and committing to something. And these kids get an opportunity to commit to things. um, but my friend said no, it's not just that they're over prescribing these drugs, and they're over diagnosing these things. We're literally giving kids ADHD by the media they're consuming.
mhm,
Everything is these short hits, the shorts, the reels, the TikToks, the bang, 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 bang. Even their cartoons
yeah,
are being cut about every second or a half a second. They're doing a cut, and so it's just like they don't want you to focus. They want you to constantly be overstimulated and hit the dopamine centers, and the front cortex of the brain is just always firing. And when you get them in the gym and they're training, they're sweating, they're breathing hard, and they're working out, they're doing something that they're designed to do. This is the way they were created in God's image to
mhm,
you know be young men. And one of the other things that we're lacking is outdoor activities. And I mean, I have another big project. There's 90 acres. It used to be an old quarry, and I
mhm,
think we can. I mean, the environmental BS and stuff. It's like, man, just plant some trees and let's get some kids out there playing.
mhm,
But they've got to the city, the state. They got to, I mean, they got to spend money. They, you
mhm,
know, they got to spend money. They got to create problems that they can. That the only solution is more government.
mhm,
It's like, we have a problem. We need more money from you, and we need more government, you know, administrating these funds. And
mhm,
none of the funds make it to the problem. They make it to all these administrators. And but there's 90 acres right behind the school that I pick up the kids from, which is at the end of the block from my gym.
Hmm.
And we could turn this into like a really beautiful outdoor activity area for kids to get into nature. But right now, they won't even let us into this space because it was a quarry. It might have toxics, and I mean, I played as a kid. I'm fine.
Yes, we were. Growing up, we had a lot of liberties, I guess, given to us by our parents.
Oh man, I know. It was like, be home before dark, could you? You know,
Yeah.
we didn't have a cell phone to call them and tell them, "Hey, I'm stuck in the woods. I can't get home."
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting that you said about your friend, the neuroscientist. Is that what
Yeah,
he was?
yeah. Doctor.
There's a psychologist up here. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He's making a lot of noise, but Dr. Jordan Peterson from the University of Toronto.
Yeah,
But you
he's
have
pretty
heard of
popular. He's a pretty popular guy. I actually didn't love his book. Everybody was going about this 12 rules or something. I picked it up. I read it. Okay. I mean, common sense stuff. But
him?
I've heard him on interviews. I think he's part of Ben Shapiro's organization. I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's popular. He is very
yeah.
popular down here as
Well,
well.
I just scrolled across, and one of my things, and he was actually saying the same thing. He was saying that a lot of these kids are over medicated, and he's talking about here in his domain where he operated, and and he was dealing with personality disorders and all stuff like that. So I'm assuming he's kind of an expert in that. So as I'm listening to him, and it kind of makes sense because you know, and then again, what you said about the this day and age where it is click and the dopamine is released, click, 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 click. Everything that is made for these young kids that come through their phone or through their computer, it's all about instant dopamine release, right? That's the way companies have geared it, and nobody is protecting these kids from it anymore.
They're not protecting them from the porn, from the like. They're I mean, they've got the days of finding a dirty book, in the woods, and that somebody threw out.
Yeah.
Those days are gone. You got instant access to it on your cell phone. I mean,
Mhm.
on demand.
The minute you give your child a phone, they have access to the world. So I think that's one of the things as parents, and I know that I restrict, a lot of what comes into the house because of that. If you think about, cell phones, and I talk to some of the kids and parents in where I work, and I tell them like listen, do you lock the door at night? Most people do in the cities, right? I don't know about you in your cabin,
Yeah,
but you lock your door because you're afraid that somebody might come in and steal your stuff or do whatever. But if you do that, why would you let your child go up to their bedroom with their phone? Because you're letting hundreds, if not millions, of people access to your child, and it's not your child you should be worried about. If you brought your kid up with good values and stuff like that, it's that one person that has been doing this for a living that is trying to reach your child, and if they do, it can cause tons and tons of problems. And I've seen it where with human trafficking, it just turns around a kid's life within 8 hours. It's
and
that's
and you know this because you deal with this stuff every day, and you're right. You're letting the world in, and not the kingdom. I mean, you're either pulling hell up, or
yeah.
you're bringing heaven down. Like, and it's we're dealing with a lot of demonic spirits right now.
Hmm.
That these spirits are the same spirits of Babylon, and
Hmm.
but they never die. Demons don't die.
No,
so
no,
so
no,
they
either.
just they're just tormenting the next generation, and
Hmm.
uh and our kids are really vulnerable, and we have to protect them, and we have to provide opportunities, we have to protect them, and that's what we try to do at our gym. I mean,
Hmm.
I don't think anybody could surpass the amount of guys that we put in the UFC, guys we put in for world title fights. And I mean, we had a lot of guys come through our gym that have been very successful in mixed martial arts. And now
Hmm.
I think the next generation is about, training up young men to be strong, brave warriors. And maybe some of them will follow that path of,
Hmm.
of it. using this as a career for a sport. Because these are the same guys that were Ed Hermans and Chris Liebens and uh, Nuno's, and there's just, if I went through the list, people would be like, oh yeah, I remember that guy, I know that guy.
Mhm.
These are the same kids that I got when they were early 20s, but now they're 5 to 8 years old.
Mhm.
They're the same boys from Southeast Portland. That
Mhm.
grew up in a tough environment. Their parents weren't around, or they were doing drugs,
Mhm.
and we see it every day. It breaks my heart when a kid's crying, just like you were telling me that story. Because his dad didn't come pick him up. Well, these kids are, before classes even like, I don't know if my dad's gonna be up today. And like, he'll be
Mhm.
here, I'm sure. And if he's not, we'll stay right here with you till he does. It's like,
Mhm.
it's hard. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, as a mentor, as a father, to see that sort of thing does torment your soul. Like it's a horrible thing to see that a young child gets put through something like that. And it's our
Hmm.
job as fathers or as mentors, coaches, teachers to step up to the plate and provide that community that is responsible for bringing these kids up.
Yeah, it is very valuable. I hate the Hillary Clinton cliche of it takes a village to raise a child. No, it literally doesn't. It takes two super engaged parents,
Yes.
two,
Yeah.
not one,
Hmm.
and you can raise a very healthy, productive child. I can prove it. you know, um, but if
Yeah.
you don't have those things, somebody has to step into the gaps
Yeah.
and fill those missing father wounds and stuff. And we've got some dads that are there, and having a dad's better than not having a dad, even if your dad's you know drunk and on drugs and not
Hmm.
picking you up on time. It's still better to have a dad.
Hmm. Yeah. It's and I think there's data behind that as well as single parent households with without father figures. There is a higher proclivity for these young kids to get involved in criminality, and it just gets. I think I think it was one of your presidents that actually, I think it was Obama at the time, had mentioned that they need father figures. But there is data that supports that as well. So
Yeah, but
there's.
why all the policies to
Mm.
remove fathers from the home? The policies directly impact this. Here,
Yeah.
if you don't have a man in the house, we're going to feed your kid, we're going to house your kid, we're going to give you your own apartment. It's they incentive you get more of what you incentivize.
Hmm.
So you can talk all you want about that, but unless your policies actually reflect that, we've and I know up in Vancouver area, I don't know about Toronto, but I know up in Vancouver, there's a pretty big drug epidemic with fentanyl and all that.
Yeah.
I think it's a West Coast thing. I don't know for sure. I live in the West Coast, so I see it up and down Seattle, Vancouver,
Hmm.
Portland. I don't go down to San Francisco a lot, but it's the fentanyl that's really attacking these liberal cities. And we're trying to solve these problems by we passed a measure 110 where we decriminalized every drug, um, state of Oregon.
Hmm.
And I was living here at the time. I was living in Colorado, and I was just on a town hall with the news station, and everybody wants to do this harm reduction where you pass out needles and pipes so they can smoke, so they can get clean needles. You hand them
Hmm.
Narcan, and you just enable this process until eventually they're gonna die. But
Hmm.
they keep enabling it instead of saying, "Hey, there might be some consequences if we want to stop this. We could probably enforce some laws." I don't know. You're
Hmm.
the law and order guy.
Well, I can tell you, what ends up happening when you take away. So drugs are a major financial, I guess, gaining for gangs, right? You utilize drugs to
Fund
thrive,
their
get
Yeah.
things done to get themselves rich, right? So when you take that away from a gang member, let's say a street gang, you have a street gang somewhere in your neighborhood or in your state. When you take their financial gains away from them, what do you think replaces that? Because they're not going to say, "Oh well, you know what? I can't make any more money. Just going to give up." They're not. What they do is they look for other things to do that are going to gain money, whether that's robbery. And this
Hmm.
is the one that really bothers me is that it's being replaced by human trafficking. And it's not human trafficking when it comes to, I think, when we were growing up, um, it was I guess human trafficking was seen as people coming from different countries and them being enslaved in sex trade or just work. That's no longer happening that way. It's actually kids from your own backyard, your small towns. These guys are recruiting them over the internet, and they're doing a great job through it. All they have to do is feed them a bunch of, lines about, "Hey, you look so pretty," or "Hey, man, you're cool," just building up their self esteem. And the turnaround from human trafficking, and I've talked to officers that have worked in our human trafficking unit, is pretty quick. It can be about 8 hours, and it just takes it like that. And then you're being prostituted, whether you're a boy or a girl, you're being prostituted around the state or around the province or the country. Because the more they travel, it's harder to actually catch the trafficker, right? And that's the way these kids are being, trafficked all over not just one state, but they're going all over. But the thing is when you do, and that the point was, you take away my financial gains through the drug sales, I'm going to find another means. And I don't think when policymakers look at, oh, I've got a great idea, I don't think they look at the entire issues that come along with it. Because you're going to make a decision. There's going to be some other things that are going to cause some issues too,
Well,
right?
I mean, the other thing with even the user on the user level, Sean, is
Mm,
if they can't get what they need, I mean,
yeah.
they're going to go steal your catalytic converter. They're going to steal your car. Property crimes are through the roof.
Mm-hmm.
Not the same as human lives, but it's some of the same problem.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, on all this stuff. So, we're trying to make an impact and and create this for some of these kids.
Mhm.
We can't pick every kid. Well, the ones that
Yeah.
we get an impact on, we're doing the best that we can train and provide them with community and that sense of purpose.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, going back to the kids again. You're talking about, getting them to focus that energy, that negativity that's in their house or in their lives. You were saying that you channel them through the workouts and stuff like that. What do you do? Like, let's say you have a kid, he's problematic behavior. He comes to you guys, or mom comes to you, or dad comes to you and says, "Hey, he's a little bit of a handful." How do you start the process with a young kid like that?
Every man wants to be respected, and these are
Hmm.
young little men. They want to have they show them respect first of all, and re, respect doesn't need to be earned. You can give
Hmm.
respect. I
Hmm.
don't necessarily have. I can show you
Hmm.
respect, and I think showing these kids that you can respect them first. You know,
Hmm.
your actions. You tell them that there are consequences though for those actions that are because what happens is it's like, "Hey, don't do that. Oh, here's advice. Okay, just go away to deal with it anymore." And you know that's not what we deal with it. you
Hmm.
know we get down on the mats, we their level, come straight in the eyes, and we're like, you understand half the time they're not listening anyway. you know, and with some cases they don't listen. She's like, they're They do hear you, and
Hmm.
it's not the first time. The second time might be the 100th time that you have to tell them, but you have to be consistent with it. You can't just be like, okay, I'm done. Here's a device. Go sit down. Don't disrupt the class. You
Hmm.
have to deal with the issues, over and over, and until they start to figure this out. And then when they figure it out a little bit, they're excited because they're realizing that they're heading in the right direction.
Hmm. Yeah. These kids, like you said, at home, the structure, the boundaries are not set. It's basically, if they cross those boundaries, mom and dad are like, "Well, behavior problem here. Give you this iPad, give you this phone, and just relax. I don't need this kind of crap," because the parents are going through their own stuff at work or whatever, but so they just
Mhm.
give up kind
Especially
of on
in
their
a
own.
in a
And
community where you're just trying to put food on the table and make the rent payment every month.
mhm, yeah, yeah, it's tough for the parents, but again, I think when we have kids, we have a responsibility to really be there for them at times, and it is time. It is you know with your job and being pulled left and right. Sometimes it's hard, but that's why you need that other supportive parent too, right?
Why you need two parents. That's why
Hmm.
you need two parents. It's a team effort.
Hmm.
Kids need both. They need the father, and they need a mother, and they're different roles. And the
Hmm.
fact that we're telling you know young people that men and women are the same, we're not. We're totally different, and
Hmm.
kids get different things from their father than they do their mother, and
Hmm.
vice versa. And they need both of those parents involved, and unfortunately that's not the case for a lot of these families. It's
Hmm.
just not a reality. So you try to step in and fill in those gaps the best you can,
Hmm.
but it's still not ideal.
Yeah, Matt, you have been known to be a brawler, man, on the mats and in the UFC. You got a big heart, man. It sounds like has it changed, or have you always been that way?
Oh, I mean, I've always been about kids and family,
Mhm.
and I mean, like I said, the hardest thing about my son will be down today for Thanksgiving with his wife, and my daughter's in Colorado, but we're going to go out there for Christmas,
Mhm.
and so we're going to visit her for Christmas. My son works at the gym now, so I get to see him every day. Yeah, I mean, that was one of the really nice things about while my kids were in their school years. I would my career was as an athlete, fighting MMA stuff, and so you train hard, 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours at night, and I could get up before they even got out of bed and get my morning lift in, and get them off to school, pick them up from school, go to afternoon training. So I had a lot of flexibility in my schedule to spend time with my kids and
Mhm.
be around them and be engaged in their lives, because you're only going to get so much time. Once they're grown, it's like come down for the holiday weekend. And I am very blessed that James works with us at the gym now.
Mhm.
Um, but and my daughter, when we were living there in Colorado, she just got out of her grad school and was starting her career, and was like, well, I think you guys are living in Colorado. I'll come out and do a job search out there.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, that makes you feel pretty good when
Yeah.
your daughter wants to move out and then you end up leaving her. That's the hardest thing. I think probably one of the biggest things I accomplished was, my daughter's 16th birthday, and I said to her, well, your birthday's coming up in a couple weeks. What do you want to do? And she's like, take me up to Max Canyon. Let's steelhead fish for a week and hang out and hang out and camp and get up and fish every day. So, I mean, on her 16th birthday, we spent a week fishing, in
That's
the
all.
mountains, and we have a lot of great memories just from that single trip.
Mhm.
There was a big mountain coming out of the canyon,
Mhm.
and she goes, how long do you think it'd take us to get to the top of that, Dad? I'm like, I don't know, babe, but at least a couple hours. She's like, you want to hike it tomorrow? And I'm like, yeah, we'll hike that tomorrow. And But here's the deal, sweetheart. If we start, we got to go all the way to the top
Mm-hmm.
because it's going to get tough. When we get about 2/3 of the way up there, it's going to get really steep and really tough.
Mm-hmm.
And we gotta summit this thing. So
Yeah.
it literally did. And I was like, I told you. She's like, we can just go back. I'm like, no, we started. We're gonna get to the top. But it was just kind of ironic when we got to the top. There was actually like a place where you could scratch your name in a plaque somebody had put up there that you could scratch your name in there, like we made it. There was a few other people that had made it already up there,
Nice.
and somebody else up from the canyon was like, "You think I can get to the top of it?"
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it's just spending time together, and knowing that you're loved. I think that's really important.
Yeah. I'm listening to you talk about your relationship with your daughter, which is awesome. But I also see that you're teaching her a valuable lesson in life, one about perseverance. No, we're not going to quit. We're going to keep on going. Is that something you learned from wrestling, or is it something you learned from just your own parents?
I definitely think. I mean, I had a very blessed upbringing.
Hmm.
I grew up next door to my grandparents, and the house next door was my great grandparents, and I was always around family, and I was always around really good male role models. I mean, I just
Hmm.
had strong men that were around me, like loggers, plumbers, like just dudes that got up and went to work and provided and came home and loved their families. And so I mean, I think that definitely helps. But I think when you start a sport like wrestling at an elite level, martial arts, I think it accelerates that. It's throwing gas on the fire. It's like, yeah, I got a little bit of these tendencies, but you really start to develop it and hone it and understand that, man, this is a lot harder than it's going to be.
Hmm.
I mean, I told my that's the moral of that story was like, yeah, it's doable, but it's going to be
Hmm.
tough. There's going to be a struggle. It's going to be hard, and that's just
Hmm.
a life thing. I mean, it's going to struggle. It's going to be hard until we're done. We got to keep pushing forward. And hopefully we can inspire and encourage some other people along the way. And
Hmm.
that's kind of what I'm trying to do right now is literally pour courage into these young students that I got in the gym. I mean, they're hard to deal with and they're tough sometimes. you
Yeah.
know, it's like I look at these kids and they're like, "This is hard." I'm like, "So is dealing with you." Like yes, yes, this is all hard.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like that perseverance is still, it comes in handy if you had it, and you, like you said, you have the background in wrestling, MMA, and again, I was going to go
And
right to the,
sun,
you beat me to it.
right?
Sorry, that.
I said that sun was coming up, and you don't see that a whole
Oh.
lot here in the Northwest, dude.
Mm.
Sun's
You
coming
gotta
up.
savor those moments.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, it's probably
that's awesome.
noontime where you're at. It's morning here on this coast.
Yeah, it's 12:30 right now. Yeah, so
Yeah.
you West Coast. I actually got to experience that time zone when I was going to school down in Fresno City College. Way too hot though for me down there. That's why I came back up to Michigan.
Yeah. It's pretty warm down that valley.
Yeah, yeah. So I wanted to talk a little bit about your wrestling and how, because I mean, it's been told this before, but just for maybe our viewers here, but the nickname you have is the Law, and of course you're talking to a law enforcement guy right now, but like, how did the name come about?
Well, unfortunately, there's a lot of politics in sports.
Hmm.
A lot of politics in life. It's just you deal with organizations and leadership all the time, and when I got to the Olympic trials in '96, I lost the match. I didn't make the team. I went with the team to Atlanta as a training partner and got to experience what that Olympics was going to look like. And for the next 4 years, I mean, I just pushed through to make sure I wasn't going to, miss that opportunity to go to the games the next
Mhm.
year. And I got to a level where I was competing with the best guys in the world, and I wasn't concerned about the competition in the United States.
Mhm.
I was on the previous four world teams going into those games. The guy I was wrestling in the finals of the trials, I'd beaten the last 13 times in a row,
Mhm.
and a match was completely misjudged. And
Mhm.
when it was misjudged so egregiously, you were like, "Man, there's politics at play in here."
Mhm.
But there's a process, and I'm going to follow this process. And it was filing a protest and have the match reviewed under video. That was
Mhm.
within my rights. Um, I didn't write the rules. I'm just following the rules that are placed in front of me. And I was told we are not going to review the match because it's judgment. I said it's not judgment. You misapplied the rules.
Mhm.
And if you watch the film, you'll see where I misapplied the rules in our sport. Uh, Make the correction, and we'll do a rematch.
Mhm.
And they said, no, we're not going to do that. Well, so I filed the papers. I paid the fee to file the papers, and they just refused to review the match. They just said, yeah, we got video. We're not.
Mhm.
And you're like, so I can't prove that I'm right, even though I can prove that I'm right immediately. So the next step in the process was take this to the Greco-Roman Sport Committee within the organization,
Mhm.
and so they're going to not necessarily review the match, but they're going to at least look at the and make a recommendation. And
Mhm.
at this point, they started plucking members off of the sport committee that may
Mhm.
have had bias. Well, everybody innately has bias, Sean.
Mhm.
There's bias within. That's why you have a committee.
Mhm.
You don't have one individual committee because everybody's going to have bias. But they selectively took people off the committee that may have voted in my behalf. So I had to a arbitration. That was my last recourse. So I've
Mhm.
been denied my due process and rights 2 times from my own
Mhm.
organization, who I've represented for the last 4 years in the World Championships.
Mhm.
Um, the other guy that I beaten 13 times in a row wasn't capable of performing at that level
Mhm.
internationally.
Mhm.
So I took the case to the arbitrator, and the arbitrator. I know nothing about this sport of wrestling, but I do understand the law. And
Mhm.
if you write policies, you can't just start changing them. And
Mhm.
so he tested, and arbitration is supposedly final and binding. He
Mhm.
suggested that we re-wrestled the match and represents the United States. Well, I won that match 9-0, and there
Mhm.
was a lot more to that story because they
Mhm.
called me. They called me the night before and said, "Oh, you weigh in less than 24 hours in Colorado
Mhm.
Springs." Well, I was living in Lincoln, Nebraska at the time.
Mhm.
Fortunately, I'd kind of got wind of this, and I was already in Colorado Springs when I took that call,
Yep.
um, knowing that this was most likely going to happen.
Mhm.
Um, Won the match, and they would not put me on the team.
Mm.
And so we had to go get a federal judge at the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals to enforce that. At the same time, they were putting me on the team. They were behind the scenes trying to re-arbitrate a case that's final and binding.
Mhm.
Both parties agreed to go to arbitration, but you had one party that when they got the arbitrating that they didn't want, they just said, "Oh, we'll re-arbitrate it." so 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 the case was re-arbitrated in another court, but at the same time that was going on, we went and got another judge to rule over this and say, no, this is everybody's done everything right except for USA Wrestling and the United States Olympic Committee. You guys are the only ones that are doing things wrong. The language in the brief was actually the judge referred to the leadership as scofflaws.
Oh.
Scofflaw, and I thought that was a pretty harsh, way to put that. So ultimately, the case ended up in the United States Supreme Court. The Supreme Court looked at what the Ninth Circuit did and said, no, under orders of the U.S. Supreme Court, they put me on the team, took me to Sydney, and we were actually in Canberra training camp. When I got to Sydney, walked in the opening ceremonies, the organization tried to reopen the case in the International Court of Arbitration for Sport, and the judge, we're in Australia. The judge in Chicago gets woken up in the middle of the night, and he's like, "Yeah, there's nothing I can do internationally. My jurisdiction only extends throughout the entire United States. But no, if you ever plan on coming back, we'll have air marshals waiting. So go ahead and re-arbitrate this case a third time in an international court. But I'll have air marshals waiting to arrest you when you get back. So you make the decision." So after walking in opening ceremonies and more days, that time, those 2 days in between opening ceremonies and competition, they ultimately dropped the case, and I got on the scale and entered the tournament and made it to the finals. Didn't win the finals, but walked away with a silver medal. So I was pretty satisfied with where I was at.
Must have felt pretty good to have that result after going through all that.
It was, I've learned that during stressful times and the harder things get, the more focused I can become. It's like, yeah, I'm capable. When shit's going down and things are going bad, I get a lot more focused and I can accomplish whatever the task is that needs to be taken care of. I think it's a good quality to have.
Oh, for sure. Take you a long way in life. So who was the first person that called you the law?
I think it was just the guys in the training room, Randy and Jail and, a bunch of the athletes I trained with every day just started laughing, making fun of it. So I was like, yeah, that'll stick.
Yeah. That's cool. That's neat. So people still come up to you and call you the law?
All the time. I still get called Gumby from some of the guys when I first started wrestling, Shawn.
Oh yeah.
When I first started, I was in high school. I didn't even start the sport till I got into high school. I was wrestling with guys that have been doing it since they were like 5, 6 years old. Just took beatings from a lot of these guys, and what I realized is there's a period to start. It's not, you don't start a kid at 5, 6 years old unless you're just having fun, playing, developing, like we're with our young kids that are 5, 6, 7, 8. We're getting them on the mat, but we're not training them at a high level. They're going to one competition that's been planned out for months and months, and they know that it's not going in, getting the experience, learning what you don't know, so we can come back to the gym and we can fix those things, we can develop those things. It's not putting the process is more important than the result. And trying to develop that in these young kids. But what I see through a lot of youth development in the United States is it's like we want to get our kids national titles at 6, 7, 8 years old. And what I see over and over, by the time that kid's been pushed and driven, he hasn't developed the the want to, the know how to. It's been dad and mom and the coaches that are doing the pushing. And there's a point where, especially when the athlete turns about his teen years and he wants to start getting his independence, he's like, man, I don't want to do this. I've never wanted to do this. This isn't for me. This has been for somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And that was never the case with me. It always, this is what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
Once I discovered the sport, I was like, oh, there's a level to this, and there is so many levels.
Mm-hmm.
You talk to people or kids or parents, and it's like, my kid's so good. It's like, yeah, sure, he is at that level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's great
Yeah.
at that level. But
Mm-hmm.
there's constantly different levels, in sport.
Yep. Yeah. Part of the reason why I started this podcast more so for to really kind of broaden my coaching experience and learn from coaches that are out there, experienced wrestlers, experienced athletes. And I had a turn to actually interview former University of Michigan's swim coach, guy on the TV there behind me, named
Okay.
Jim Richardson. And one of the things, he's a very I love this guy. He's like he's kind of like your grandfather. You want to sit across the table from him and just learn about life from him. And of course, he's swimming. I'm wrestling. I sit there and I'm
Yeah.
listening to. Of course, at first I think I'm not going to learn anything from this guy. But I will tell you, when you talk about parents and how they put the influence um, on these kids, they influence them to perform. It's more these parents are trying to live through their kids. And he
Hmm.
talked as I was sitting in the natatorium, listening to him talk to a bunch of parents at this swim camp, and he was talking about how these the parents, they focus on the uncontrollables being you know the wins, the medals, because you never know if you're going to win. It's because there might be somebody tougher, and as a result of that, what ends up happening is that kid always thinks about, okay, well, and we talked about dopamine release earlier, but my dad gives me a hug when I win. My mom gives me kudos when I win. Same thing with math tests, right? In the classroom, when I win. And what he said really hit me because, I mean, of course, I've been through it as well. But he said, you need to focus on effort and attitude. He goes, effort and attitude will outwork talent any day. And, after that talk, I was like, my goodness, this man is a genius. And I got to listen to him talk more and more and more. And and I did a podcast with him, and I will tell you, the man is all about athlete development, very similar to what you're talking about as well, and how the focus needs to be, on the journey of the individual. Otherwise, you're going to repel, and the kid won't want to perform because there's too much pressure at home. What's your
Well,
thoughts
yeah,
on?
my goal with these young kids is just to develop a lifelong passion for martial arts.
Hmm.
And wrestling's my first martial art, and probably the one that I'm the most familiar with and understand, and have coached at the highest level of the sport. But I've also coached, the highest level in MMA.
Hmm.
I've coached guys in world title fights in the UFC. So I mean, I do have a pretty deep understanding of that. But when you talk about youth development, I mean, you can't be thinking, this guy's going to be the next UFC champion. It's at 5, 6 years old. It's like develop the passion and the love for the sport and the process.
Hmm.
Develop develop the love,
Yeah.
of wanting to do this. Then you've got a chance.
Yeah.
You got a chance that he's going to even continue in the sport and do this. And so all we want to do is create an outlet for these kids to have an activity to do that's super positive. They're around great mentors. I've got a lot of other great coaches that are in my gym helping. My wife's in there because some of these kids don't have a mom too, and
Mhm.
they really crave that. you know, it's pretty cute to see some of these kids that you can definitely tell the ones that don't have dads, and immediately tell the ones that don't have moms, because who they kind of gravitate to. Uh, it's and there's one little guy. He's just he tells my wife he loves her every
Yeah.
day. He actually has a mom, and he's got a very tough mom. Like I've seen
Mhm.
this mom and the way she comes in, and she's like, grab your gear, get your shoes on, you know,
Mhm.
and then after he gets his responsibilities done, I'm not
Mhm.
picking up your bag, you pick up your bag, but those little things like that, I just watch those little things. Oh, here, mama, do mama, oh, you left your flip-flops, you left your water bottle, oh, here's your belt, oh, your geese over here. Like, they're just gathering it all up, and this mom comes in and she's like, there's all your gear, you gather this up, and then we'll talk. Like, you have a
Mhm.
chore to do right now, and
Yeah.
I like this little mom, because she's a lot like my wife. She's like, no, pick this stuff up, you know, clean your mess, don't leave that trash on the floor, throw that in the garbage can. I
Mhm.
mean, they need to be trained, and once they're trained and they understand that this is how you behave in a dojo, and you bow before you get on the mats, and you show respect to your training partners and certainly your coaches.
Mhm.
So it's a lot of just developing life skills for these kids through the martial arts.
Mhm.
And it's the outlet I know best. I mean, I understand there's other outlets. There's a lot of great outlets. Um, my kids learned responsibility, raising cattle, raising hogs. Uh, um, I mean, it doesn't have to be through martial arts, and they both did martial arts too. But they need to develop those life skills.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, and you know what? That you talk about that mom telling him to do A, B, C, D. She's preparing him for life. Those
yeah,
little lessons that you are, and we think that are just nagging at your children. Well, our kids are probably thinking that you're nagging at me, dad, or you're nagging at me, mom. Those are the lessons that we're teaching you. Do the dishes, because if you don't do the dishes now, and if I, as a parent, just let that it happen, I do the dishes for them. Well, what's going to happen when they move out on their own? And they got to figure out how to use a dishwasher or actually clean things on their own. And we're not doing it. We're doing them a disservice when we're not involved in their life like that. I like the story that you're telling about the parent there. That's awesome.
yeah. I mean, it's not about being served. It's others,
Hmm.
and by nature, just our inherent nature, and kids demonstrate that they're selfish. They're super
Hmm.
selfish little individuals.
Hmm.
They don't come out good. They come out evil, and you have to train them to be what good is. It's like you know
Hmm. So you've coached at the highest level in your sport, whether it's MMA, like you said, at the UFC, or at a national team, Olympic coach, and now you're coaching these young kids. I'm going to ask you because I've kind of gone the same path. Not at the I've coached at our national level,
Mhm.
but and now I'm coaching these young kids. Which one do you find more rewarding?
I think you know the answer. I mean, I,
Yeah.
I it's obvious. The answer
Yeah.
is obvious.
Mhm.
Elite athletes. I mean, I mean, the best experience I've had is helping guys that would their lives would be a lot differently if they didn't have martial arts, didn't have wrestling. Their lives would not be as fulfilled, productive. Those are the biggest things that I've accomplished. It's not the medals and the titles and the championships. It's really a lot of these guys that I've coached, over 30
Mhm.
years I've been coaching. I mean, I've been my first coaching job. I I just took a 15-year-old athlete over to what's Levi's last name? He was wrestling in the pro. He was a D1 All American in Arizona. I'm trying anyway. It'll come to me his last name,
Mhm.
but he's in our area. It's about 30 minutes away from our gym, but he's going to run a heavyweight camp. And I had a freshman last year that made it to the state finals. Um, Pretty good, and he got on the national team this year and wrestled all summer and wanted to elevate his game. And I was like, well, I mean, yeah, I can train you, but here you've got another is willing to run this practice on Tuesday nights. Let's go over there together. And I walked in that wrestling room, and it brought back a lot of memories because that was my first coaching job in 1993. I walked into that room, and there was three kids that I coached on the wall that were all state champions that year. And I'm bringing another student in here, 30
Mhm.
years later to that same wrestling room. But I mean, that's another story. But it's I want these kids to be exposed to other coaches as well. Like you said, you learned from this swimming coach. I
Mhm.
had an opportunity to be mentored by Coach Dungy during 2020. He was like, "Yeah, I got some time off. We're not traveling. Let's do
Mhm.
Zoom calls once a week." I got mentored by him, by Jack Stark, who is the sports psychologist for the University of Nebraska, multiple NFL teams, NASCAR.
Mhm.
Um, One of my mentors since I started college in '91. He was the first guy that called me when I got hired and said, "Hey, any way I can help, let me know. If I
Mhm.
can help, work some mental coaching with some of your elite athletes, I'm here." Um, but yeah, taking guys that were really heading down a bad path and going, "Hey, let's find something productive. Let's take you're not toxic man. You're not, you don't have these are natural male tendencies. They just need to be directed and channeled in the right direction.
Mhm.
And you can be really productive, So I think it's really, I don't know if it's the age, if it's coaching the young guys or coaching the elite guys. It's developing humans
Mhm.
through martial arts and through coaching and training, and just seeing them be successful. I mean, one of my best athletes that I was left, um, USA Wrestling. He was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna go another direction too, coach." He joined the WWE. He's gonna be a superstar, and I'm telling you, in no time. I just know it.
Mhm.
Um, but he also, the same time, he was leaving, amateur wrestling and going into the entertainment wrestling. He got married, found a great wife. I mean, just started making some better choices.
Mhm.
And this was an athlete that I was told don't bring into the training center. 16
Mhm.
years old, he just got kicked out of high school, and I was like, this dude can wrestle. He doesn't know what he's doing, but he's an incredible athlete, and if we train him, he can wrestle. He made an Olympic team. He won a world medal in Oslo in 21.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, and just decided, hey, I'm gonna use what I've learned and go a different direction and start a family and build a career. And
Yeah.
those are probably the most rewarding things, whether
Mhm.
it's a 5-year old or a 25-year old.
Mhm. Changing people's lives are better than the medals that you earn. I'd have to agree with you.
And those relationships that are going to last a lifetime.
Mhm. Yeah.
The guys that I've coached and connected with, I mean, are still texting me on Thanksgiving morning, and and you know, telling me they're thankful for the relationships.
Mhm. I so I'm going to go into this book that I read. It's called "Let Them Lead" by John U. Bacon. He's an Ann Arbor guy. Um, so I read that book, and one of the things he talked about is, you know, similar to the story that you just told about that young kid, 16-year-old, and you were told not to even give him a chance.
Yeah,
You got to think about when you don't give these kids a chance, what happens to them when you don't. So it should be upon us to say, you know what, no, I'm going to work with it, and I'm going to do this. There's a mindset for a lot of people that, I don't want to put into these kids, and if you do, you see results.
unbelievable results.
Mhm.
You know, and this young man I'm talking about, you know, I mean, he had a father, but his father wasn't around.
Mhm.
And I think one of the biggest things that probably has changed his life was having somebody that was like, listen, you got to forgive your dad. Like you
Mhm.
got to forgive the guy. He wasn't there, you
Yeah.
know, and you can't change the past, but you can you can really hurt yourself by staying bitter and angry because he wasn't there, or you could start to build a relationship with your dad now, and he has, you know, like you know, he takes his dad fishing.
Mhm.
You know, he's like, let's go fishing. I know how to catch fish. I'm gonna take you now, Dad, because you
Yeah.
never took me.
Yeah.
And and learning how to forgive and just go, yeah, I mean, I was hurt, and I mean, you can tell that's probably why he was going down a really bad path.
Matt, I want to thank you for coming on the show. It's always a blast. I mean, I think we met about maybe 20 years ago down at in Portland, Oregon, when I came down to train with you guys.
Mm-hmm.
And you've been an outstanding character ever since, man. I'm glad to call you a friend. But I want to
Thank you.
wish you an amazing Thanksgiving for you and your friends, your family. You're doing some great work with those kids. Keep it up.
Thank you very much. I have a lot to be thankful for, and I'm very blessed. And it's great to catch up with you, Sean. Keep doing
Yeah.
some great stuff, man.